Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the 2024 Tennessee Valley Sports Network March Madness Preview Show. I'm your host, Noah Brady. We will focus primarily on the highly anticipated matchups involving four teams from the state of Alabama, including Alabama, Auburn, UAB, and Samford. Before we dive in, I just want to encourage you to join the 2024 Tennessee Valley Sports Network Bracket Challenge on the ESPN Tournament Challenge app. With the arrival of March Madness, we are doing a bracket challenge. Test your college basketball knowledge or just get in on the fun and submit your bracket to the ESPN Tournament Challenge group. As the tournament plays out, see how your bracket stacks up with the rest of the group. No gimmicks, no requirements, just bragging rights. Join our group by searching the Tennessee Valley Sports Network Bracket Challenge or clicking the link in the description. That is the Tennessee Valley Sports Network Bracket Challenge. Well, over the past week, we saw Samford, Auburn, and UAB clinch automatic bids to the NCAA Tournament after winning their respective conference championships. Alabama on Sunday got their name as called as an at-large bid after suffering a blowout loss to Florida and Nashville on Friday. But over the week, Samford defeated East Tennessee State 76-69 in the SoCon Tournament Championship. Samford looked a little bit tight at times in that conference championship. They're going to have to play a little bit more loose if they're going to want to get that upset win over Kansas. We'll talk about that here shortly. Alabama, meanwhile, lost in an embarrassing fashion, 102-88 to Florida in the SEC Tournament quarterfinal in Nashville on Friday. Meanwhile, Auburn made a run and defeated Florida 86-79 in the SEC Tournament Championship, winning 3 games on 3 nights. And they get the automatic bid out of the SEC. And meanwhile, UAB made a surprise run in the American Conference Championship in their first year in the conference with the help of a couple of upsets, defeated Temple 85-69 in the American Tournament Championship after defeating Wichita State in the quarterfinals and defeating Southern Florida in the semifinals. South Florida was the favorite to win the American Conference Championship heading into the tournament. So UAB gets a bid there by winning the conference tournament in Andy Kennedy's 4th season at the helm. So let's take a quick dive into the NCAA tournament matchups in the state of Alabama before I go through and complete my bracket. First off, we're going to look at the number 13 matchup, the Yale Bulldogs, out of the Ivy League, going 22-9 on the season, versus the number 4 Auburn Tigers. So, the Auburn Tigers went 27-7 in SEC play. They're going to play Friday at 3:15 p.m. on TNT. Auburn is a 12.5-point favorite. It took Yale a miracle to get to this point and face the Auburn Tigers in the round of 64, as they needed a buzzer beater thanks to the poor defense to beat a terrible Brown team. They didn't even win the Ivy League regular season, but they are not a team to be taken lightly. This is their second appearance in 3 years, and that is due in large part to a solid defense accompanied by the 7'4" Danny Wolf. Yale's head coach Jamie Jones is no stranger to the tournament, as this is his 4th NCAA tournament appearance with the Yale Bulldogs. We got some technical difficulties, but try to get those fixed real quick before we continue on. My script went away, but so as I was saying, Yale has solid defenders around the perimeter. However, I just don't think they will be able to disrupt Auburn offensively. Auburn probably got the toughest draw out of any team that I can see outside of arguably Utah State or some of the other Mountain West teams. Certainly, Auburn got the worst draw of any 4 seed heading into the tournament, including Alabama, who I will get to later. Auburn, despite winning the SEC Tournament Championship and being ranked 5th in the net and 4th in the KenPom with 13 Quad 1 and Quad 2 wins, is sent to Spokane, Washington, which is a 2,363-mile trip where they will have to play the number 1 overall seed UConn in the Sweet 16, assuming the Tigers win their first 2 games. Regardless, for any of that to matter, Auburn has to win their first game versus Yale, and Auburn's Janiah Broome, Jalen Williams, and Aiden Holloway will be, in my opinion, too much for the Bulldogs to handle. The Tigers are a tough matchup for anyone right now. In fact, as you will see later, I may or may not have them in my Final Four, but I certainly have them going deep in this year's tournament. My biggest question for Auburn heading into the postseason was how were they going to be able to handle themselves outside of Neville Arena? Well, they answered a lot of these questions in Nashville by taking care of business. They have to travel a little bit further out, granted. However, I don't see that being enough of a factor to slow the Tigers' roll before they will have to travel to Boston for the Sweet 16. I think Auburn will cover the 12.5-point spread and they will win 88-63. Yale will not be able to overcome Auburn's size and athleticism, so I got the Tigers rolling past Yale in the round of 64. So next up, we got the Alabama Crimson Tide, as Charleston Cougars will play the number 4 seed Crimson Tide, and the Crimson Tide 21-11 on the season. Meanwhile, Charleston is 27-7. The Crimson Tide and the Cougars will face off on Friday at 6:35 p.m. Central Standard Time. That's where tip-off is scheduled on True TV. Alabama is a 9.5-point favorite. Was a 10.5-point favorite as I prepared, but as of now, Alabama's spread has trimmed to a 9.5-point favorite. So Charleston dominated the Coastal Athletic Association both in the regular season and the conference tournament. However, they did hold off a Stony Brook team in a close 82-79 overtime win. Currently, Charleston is trending to be a very hot upset pick. Many experts have Alabama one and done, and much of that has to do with Crimson Tide's play since their loss in early March to Tennessee at home. However, much of that has to do with the Cougar style of play as well. Charleston, similarly to Alabama, averages nearly 81 points per game, which is 34th in the country. Charleston has 6 players that average at least 8 points per game. The Cougars are led by a trio of Rainey Smith, Ante Berzevich, and Ben Burnham, who average more than 10 points per game. Alabama is coming into this game reeling after losing 3 out of their last 4, including an embarrassing loss in the SEC Tournament quarterfinal versus Florida. Alabama visibly has looked out of sorts lately, and their offense has not put up the numbers to back that number 1 offensive efficiency ranking. Can the Crimson Tide find the numbers to get their groove to make a run in the in the NCAA Tournament? Well, luckily for the Tide, I do believe they got the best draw out of anyone out of the 4 seed and the best draw that they could have asked for. If the Tide win versus Charleston, they get a favorable matchup against either a 5 seed St. Mary's and a 12 seed Grand Canyon. However, the Crimson Tide cannot look ahead past Charleston, which is a very dangerous team, granted. They score a lot of points offensively. However, their defense is suspect, and we'll get to that here in a second. But many experts have the Tide being one and done. But as a Tide fan, I can understand that and understand why. And as this game does smell like a potential upset, I've struggled having Alabama as far as I do, but we'll get to that a little bit later on here in the show. But I think another week off. Granted, they had a week off about almost a week off in preparation for the SEC tournament. Had exactly 6 days between the Arkansas game and the Florida game. But I do think another week off and more time for guys like Latrell Watson and Griffin will allow them to get more rest and get 100% healthy. The Crimson Tide will have a good opportunity to reset and get some things also fixed schematically heading into the NCAA tournament with that week off. Charleston defensively has a worse defense statistically than Alabama, which if you watch the Tide, that's certainly saying something. Alabama mostly relies on the scoring of Mark Sears, but with a more healthy Latrell Wrightsell Jr., that will take some of the load off of Mark Sears. Estrada looks to be more healthy as he has been dealing with a lower back strain that has required more massage in mid-game. But I think for the Charleston Cougars to win, they will have to get stops against Alabama, and I'm not sure they will be able to outscore Alabama in a shootout. if the Crimson Tide is healthy. If Nelson can stay out of foul trouble, the Tide will match the Cougars in size and should overwhelm them with their athleticism. And for those reasons, I'm going to go with the Tide. Give me Alabama. Alabama wins 91-77, and they will advance to the round of 32. So now next is the number 12 seeded UAB Blazers going to Spokane, Washington as well. 3 teams out of the state of Alabama going to Spokane, Washington. UAB, Alabama, and Auburn. Sanford will go to Salt Lake City. We'll get to Sanford here in a second. But the number 12 seeded UAB Blazers, 23-11 out of the American Conference, playing the number 5 seed San Diego State Aztecs, 24-10 out of the Mountain West Conference, and the defending national runner-up from last season, as they lost to UConn in the national title game, if you recall. The UAB Blazers and San Diego State scheduled to tip off at 12:45 p.m. on TNT. San Diego State is currently a 6.5-point favorite. And I think this may be the one instance in which I think the committee appropriately seeded a Mountain West team. I think 5 is a good spot, and San Diego State is a very solid 5 seed, going at 24-10, 11-7, in a very tough Mountain West Conference. This is really a banner year for the Mountain West Conference, getting several teams in the NCAA Tournament, including Nevada, New Mexico, Utah State, Boise State, Colorado State, and San Diego State. And that may not be everybody. That's just who I can recall off the top of my head. The Aztecs are coming off a season in which, as I mentioned previously, they were the national runner-up, falling to UConn in the national championship. In doing so, they upset Brandon Miller and the number 1 seed Alabama Crimson Tide in the Sweet 16. The Aztecs are a very experienced and veteran-led group that returns 4 players from last year's squad. Jaden Ledee averages 21 points per game and is their leading scorer. Defensively, the Aztecs are one of the best teams in the country, having the number 9 defensive efficiency team in the nation. However, offensively, they sometimes get in trouble as they often go through spells of scoring droughts. Ledee is their guy inside, but if they don't get the production from Ledee, sometimes they have a hard time finding those points, and that is why many experts, including Joe Lunardi from ESPN, have the Aztecs going one and done. On the other side, meanwhile, head coach Andy Kennedy has led the Blazers to their 4th consecutive 20-plus win season in the program's winningest 4-year stretch in its historic yet short history. This is the Blazers' 17th tournament appearance in 46 years of existence. Andy Kennedy has taken the Blazers to their 2nd tournament appearance in 3 years. They fell to a very underseeded Houston team that went on to the Elite Eight in 2022. This UAB team is actually not as good as the one that won the Conference USA in 2022 with the help of Jordan Walker and several guys like Michael Artle. So the UAB Blazers and Trey Jemison as well. So the UAB Blazers in their first season in the American Conference ran the table, including defending the AAC favorite Southern Florida to steal an NCAA tournament bid. That's the term that a lot of people on the national TV like to use, bid stealers. I don't necessarily like using the term bid stealers because that's kind of saying that a program inherently deserved a bid or was obligated to have a bid. And, if you don't win your conference, you're not really obligated to anything. And UAB was just one of those teams that got hot at the right time. And, I told several people, a lot of people know that I keep up with the UAB Blazers, and a lot of people were asking me what I thought. A lot of times this season you saw UAB would play somebody like Wichita State in February, and they would inexplicably lose. They lost in a very, very embarrassing game against Rice. And so this UAB team, though, I've told them, they're a very talented group. It just depended on where they lined up in the conference tournament, on whether they were going to be able to make a run, and they got a good draw, getting a double bye, being that 4th seed and playing in the quarterfinals, and then they had to wait Wichita State and Memphis, and they got the benefit of Wichita State upsetting Memphis So they didn't have to play Memphis in the quarterfinals, and they played South Florida. And I told a lot of people, including my good friend Austin Balding, that the UAB Blazers, was a bad matchup for the South Florida Bulls, and you kind of saw that play out. Now, it did get a little bit into a free-throw shooting contest on Saturday, but the UAB Blazers did get the win against South Florida. And then the UAB Blazers certainly benefited from the fact that the Temple Owls went on the run that they did and upset Florida Atlantic to advance to the American Conference Championship. And the UAB Blazers was able to beat I'm just going to put it plainly, a not very good Temple squad to get here. But the UAB Blazers, don't let that fool you. The UAB Blazers is a good team. They split versus Memphis, won at Bartow Arena, lost at FedEx. They split versus Florida Atlantic, and they swept South Florida. And so this UAB Blazers team is very underrated. They lost in one-possession games versus Clemson, lost in a one-possession game versus Bradley and several other good, talented teams. So don't let the fact that UAB may have the term bid stealers next to their name fool you and thinking that they're not very good. They certainly are. The UAB Blazers will need the production of Yaxel Lindenborg, who averages a double-double per game and could easily be someone who gains traction in the tournament if the Blazers were to put up a run. Lindenborg, just a few seasons ago, was a JUCO player who had no idea he would even get the opportunity to participate on a stage as big as this. So he is someone who is hungry and could get national recognition with an upset win over the Aztecs. Eric Gaines is another guy to watch out for, who was on this Blazer squad last season as a talented transfer out of LSU. The Blazers could also use the late season emergence of Alejandro Vasquez out of Queens, who put up a career high in the American Conference Championship versus Temple with, I believe, 29 points. Lastly, another guy to watch out for is the Grissom alum Butta Johnson, who averages 11 points per game and adds some length to the Blazers as a guard, standing at 6'4". As much as I would like to pick the Blazers, I just can't see all four teams in the state of Alabama advancing to the round of 32. I'm also worried about the Blazers' defense. The Blazers' defensive efficiency is not that good, to say the least, and the experience of the Aztecs may be too much to handle. I do think UAB will cover, and I think it's going to be a very close game going down the stretch, but I got the Aztecs surviving in a close, hard-fought battle, 71-67. Next up, the number 13 seeded Sanford Bulldogs out of Homewood, 29-5 on the season, will travel to Salt Lake City, Utah, to face the number 4 seed Kansas Jayhawks, who is 22-10 on the season, 10-8 in the Big 12. They tip off Thursday at 8:55 p.m. Central Standard Time on TBS. Kansas currently stands as a 7.5-point favorite. Buckyball, it's about all that many of the national talking heads can talk about going into the tournament. Sanford Bulldogs, led by head coach Bucky McMillan, has Sanford in the national conversation as a potential Cinderella story going into the tournament after leading the Bulldogs to their first tournament appearance in 24 seasons. Sanford came one game shy of winning 30 games this season and is looking to get win number 30 over the historic Blue Blood Kansas. Can they get it done? Well, let's see, and then let's take a quick dive. Kansas is reeling really bad right now. The Jayhawks have been plagued with injuries and sadly are not seeming to get any healthier. Kansas has lost 5 out of its last 8 games, including losing 4 out of their last 5. Kansas is also coming off a 20-point loss where it took garbage time for them to reach 50 points in their Big 12 tournament game versus Cincinnati. That was without the services of the 2 Big 12 leading scorers, Hunter Dickinson and Kevin McCullough Jr., with the news coming out yesterday that McCullough will be out for the entirety of the NCAA tournament. Many have picked Sanford to upset number 4 seed Kansas. It is now on the injured shoulder of Dickinson to see how far this better Jayhawks team can go. Kansas lacks depth with only 7 guys that can play or that have played more than 7 minutes per game. Their bench also averages less than 12 points per game. Yes, you heard that right. 12 points per game. They average less than that. And that is their bench. The Sanford Bulldogs are the biggest storyline coming into the tournament. as a potential Cinderella story. And why, you might ask? Well, for those that are not familiar with the Bulldogs out of Homewood, it's simple. The Bulldogs have the 8th quickest tempo in the country. A lot of you Alabama fans are used to Nate Oates and his system. It's a similar system ran by Bucky McMillan offensively. 8th quickest tempo in the country. They love attacking the rim and setting themselves up for those kick-out threes, which they shoot about 40% from beyond the arc. They also force a lot of turnovers. They are a team that like to play full court press for the majority of the game. They don't let teams just walk up the court like a lot of teams you see nowadays, especially in the modern day of college basketball, where you just the teams kind of back off and they let them get past half court and then they start playing defense. Do not expect that much out of these Samford Bulldogs. They have a lot of depth, a ton of depth for a small and mid-major program with over 10 guys averaging 10 minutes or more, which allows guys to stay fresh throughout the game. Easily the biggest name to watch out for is Achor, who averages nearly 16 points per game and 6 rebounds. He provides the Bulldogs with some size and athleticism. Jermaine Marshall is now healthy and is coming off a big performance versus East Tennessee State. They're also led by a competent guard play with Staten, McCray, and Jones. Samford has, as I previously mentioned, shot at nearly 40% from beyond the three-point line, which can pose a problem for the Jayhawks. Kansas currently ranks as the 345th team in the country. Yes, you heard that right, 345 in the nation in three-point defense, giving up good looks from beyond the arc. All of these reasons are why I have Kansas on upset alert. I'm going to pick Samford to upset Kansas 76-62. So real quick, we'll go over my top 5 potential Cinderella teams before I go into my NCAA Tournament bracket. So for my number 1 potential Cinderella team, I got the New Mexico Lobos. Now, a lot of people may wonder why I have the New Mexico Lobos as my number 1 team, and I just think it's matchups and where they are on the bracket. They're 11 seed, currently looking to face Clemson. And to be honest with you, outside of what Clemson did in the non-conference, which was before January, Clemson hasn't really impressed me. They have a lot of questionable losses to like Georgia Tech, or they sometimes lose to a team like Wake Forest in the ACC. So I have my doubts about Clemson. They face Clemson and then potentially face Baylor, and I just don't trust Baylor right now. So I could easily see New Mexico upsetting Baylor, and then they potentially would face an Arizona team. And, this Arizona team does have a lot of veteran experience, but Arizona, again, is one of those teams that down the stretch has lost some questionable games, including to the Oregon Ducks in the Pac-12 championship. And that's why I think the New Mexico Lobos could be a sneaky team heading into the NCAA tournament and could potentially make a run to the Elite Eight. And I know a lot of people might think I'm crazy, as New Mexico probably wouldn't even be in this tournament if they hadn't made an incredible run to win the Mountain West Conference Championship. But nonetheless, I don't know why. But, a lot of these times in the tournament, it's the least team that you would expect, and that's why I'm going to go on a limb and say New Mexico is number 1 on my top 5 potential Cinderella teams. And number 2, the Samford Bulldogs. Now, I don't have Samford going past the round of 32, but I very well could see Samford, if they were to get past Kansas, if they get the matchup. First of all, they may face McNeese State out of Louisiana, led by Will Wade. If they could upset Gonzaga, I could definitely see Samford and McNeese in the round of 32, and really that's one game away from getting to the second weekend and under my definition, be qualified as a potential Cinderella team. I do not have Samford getting past around the 32. I will say this, but they are number 2 on my potential Cinderella teams, just because if they can get past Kansas, not only is Kansas a good matchup for Samford, Gonzaga is also one of those teams that has a weak bench. They really only go 7 deep, and so with Samford's depth and Samford's style of play, they could give Gonzaga some fits. So don't be surprised if Samford makes a run and gets to the Sweet 16. Number 3, I got James Madison And James Madison was a team who I originally did not have getting past the round of 64, but after further evaluation and second look at my bracket, I do have James Madison making it past Wisconsin, and in fact, I even have them go to the second weekend on my bracket. I have them playing Duke. Duke I just do not trust. I did have Duke going further than I have in a second. I originally had Duke going further, but I just do not trust Duke. And so I think James Madison very well could make a run to the Sweet 16, a team that has over 30 wins out of the Sun Belt Conference, 31-3 on the season. So watch out for James Madison. I have them as number 3 on my top 5 potential Cinderella teams. And number 4, I got another in-state team out of the state of Alabama. I got the UAB Blazers. And I know a lot of people may think I'm crazy, but the UAB Blazers, if they were to get past San Diego State, would more than likely face Auburn. And if they face Auburn, the UAB Blazers would definitely be motivated to upset the Auburn Tigers. As you all know, here in our viewing area, and around the country, I am sure the two programs that get the most attention out of the state of Alabama is obviously the Alabama Crimson Tide and Auburn Tigers. And so UAB is often forgotten. They're that third little brother that oftentimes gets forgotten. So do not be mistaken. UAB would be more than happy to end Auburn's season and be a little bit extra motivated to upset Auburn in the round of 32 in Spokane, Washington, if they were to get past San Diego State. And UAB does have some sneaky good athleticism. As I previously mentioned, they got Eric Gaines, they got Butta Johnson, who averages almost 12 points per game. They have Lindeborg. So they got Christian Coleman. So do not be. And then they got Javion Davis, who oftentimes gets in foul trouble, but he is SEC big. Previously played at Alabama and Mississippi State, so he does have SEC experience, and he does provide some length for the Blazers and some rim protection. The only problem with Javion Davis is a lot of times he gets in foul trouble, but the UAB Blazers could be a sneaky Cinderella team. That's why I have them lower on my list, but nonetheless I got them number 4 on my top 5 potential Cinderella teams. And lastly, I got the Colorado State Rams as my number 5 Cinderella team. Don't ask me why, but as I watched them last night against Virginia, I liked a lot of what I saw out of Colorado State. Granted, Virginia was really, really terrible. They were trending on all over social media and Twitter. A lot of people slamming the NCAA selection committee for even allowing Virginia inside the NCAA tournament. Tony Bennett's just one of those weird coaches where he can go from just look at his track record. He lost to a 16 seed and then followed it up the very next year with an NCAA championship run. But then, I think he missed the tournament, and I think they were one and done, and now they're one and done. So very weird tenure under Tony Bennett, and a lot of questions to be answered in Virginia right now. A lot of fans upset. But I like Colorado State. Liked a lot of what I saw. They competed in a very tough Mountain West Conference. The only problem is I do like that matchup versus Texas, and I think Colorado State will get past Texas. The only issue with that is they would have to run into the Tennessee Volunteers more than likely in the round of 32 in Charlotte, and that is pretty much a home game for the Tennessee Volunteers. So for that reason, I have them getting booted out in the round of 32. But we all are here in the South are familiar with Tennessee's woes in the NCAA tournament. So don't be shocked if Colorado State were to upset Tennessee. And if they do that, then they face a Creighton or a South Carolina team that, again, could be a decent matchup for the Colorado State Rams. So not only could they possibly make a run to the Sweet 16, they could possibly make a run to the Elite 8 if they were to get there, more than likely facing a Creighton or South Carolina team, or even potentially an Oregon team. So that is my top 5 potential Cinderella teams. And so we'll move on to the last segment of the show, and that is the NCAA Tournament Challenge. First of all, if you haven't already, don't forget to join the Tennessee Valley Sports Network Bracket Challenge, whether it is testing your college basketball knowledge and challenging other people from around the Valley, or whether it's just to do it for fun and see how your bracket squares up with the rest. Don't forget to join the Tennessee Valley Sports Network Bracket Challenge. You can either join by searching up the Tennessee Valley Sports Network Bracket Challenge on the ESPN Tournament Challenge app or on the ESPN Fantasy app, I believe. Or you could click the description or click the link in the description below. We also post it on Instagram, Facebook, and now YouTube. So be sure to join the Tennessee Valley Sports Network Bracket Challenge and submit your bracket today. Brackets are due before the first tip-off of the round of 64 games, which will be tomorrow at, I believe, around 11 o'clock Central Standard Time. So be sure to complete your brackets and submit them before 11 o'clock Central Standard Time on Thursday, which is tomorrow. So I did not mean to submit my bracket to the group already, but I'm going to go ahead. I went ahead and submitted my bracket. So let's take a quick look at my bracket. So I got Houston as my national champion, spoiler alert, but real quick we'll go one by one, starting with a round of 64. As we go in the East region, we got the UConn Huskies playing the Stetson, I believe it's Mad Hatters, and so out of DeLand, Florida, which I believe is outside of Daytona. I got they're the 16 seed, won the ASUN championship, defeating Austin Peay. I have UConn, the number one overall seed, and the defending national champions defeating Stetson out of DeLand, Florida. Next, in the round of 64 out of the East region, the 8 and 9 matchup, Florida Atlantic playing Northwestern. A very good 8 and 9 matchup. This one could go either way. This is one of those coin toss games. But I'm going to go with Florida Atlantic. Florida Atlantic, fortunate. I thought they were a little bit overseeded. I thought they might be a Final Four in, being a play-in game, or be at least a 10 seed. But no, the committee gives Florida Atlantic an 8 seed. And a decent matchup with Northwestern Wildcats out of the Big Ten. Florida Atlantic, of course, went on an incredible Final Four run last season. I believe is an 8 or 9 seed. And so Florida Atlantic will have the opportunity to make a case that they're here to stay. They returned nearly all their starters from last season, so Florida Atlantic will get a chance to make another run. The unfortunate part for Florida Atlantic, and we'll get to that here in a second, is that they are in a much tougher region, having to play the UConn Huskies more than likely in the round of 32, barring any 1 versus 16 matchup, which I believe assisted Florida Atlantic in their run, as I believe they were in the same bracket. You correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they were in the same bracket, same quadrant as Purdue, which lost to FDU in the round of 64 as the 16th seed Furley Dickinson upset Purdue last season, and Florida Atlantic got a 8 versus 16 matchup, and Florida Atlantic took advantage. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's what happened. Next, I got San Diego State beating UAB. I kind of mentioned it earlier. As much as it pains me to say, and much as I want to go with the UAB Blazers, and by the way, if UAB was to shock and beat number 5 San Diego State, it would not shock me. I believe a 12 seed's beating a 5 seed 32 out of the last 38 tournaments. So I believe a 12 seed will upset a 5 seed. I may have 2 instances this season, but we'll see here in a second. But I know for sure I have one 12 seed beating a 5 seed. But I do got San Diego State beating UAB and avoiding the upset. I think it'll be close, but as I mentioned earlier, I just worry about UAB's defense down the stretch. I think UAB could lead in stretches of this game, but down the stretch, I think their defense is just too bad to get the win over San Diego State. I still think defense wins championships, and that's why I'm going to go with San Diego State. And they got and they are a veteran-led team, which in March I like a lot. Another in-state game, Auburn playing 13-seeded Yale. I got the Auburn Tigers beating Yale. Kind of went over that earlier. Although it would be nice and huge for the state of Alabama to see Auburn versus a 12, at least that guarantees one Alabama team going to the second weekend. So definitely cheering for that there. BYU playing Duquesne. Duquesne out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, advanced to their first NCAA tournament in, I believe, 47 years. Got the win over VCU. The confetti dropped early. I'm sure you probably seen that as that went viral on Sunday. The confetti dropped early, and Duquesne went on a nearly 8-minute. I believe it was nearly an 8-minute scoring drought. But fortunate for them, VCU offensively couldn't get anything going, and they went on a 10-0 run, but I wouldn't call it a 10-0 run. I'd call it more of a 10-0 brisk walk, as that 10-0 run went on for about 8 minutes and only cut the lead to 6. So I wouldn't necessarily call that a run. Illinois, I got them over Morehead State. I know a lot of people like Morehead State, and I know a lot of people doubt Illinois, as Illinois been one of those teams here recently that's had some struggles in the NCAA tournament. But I'm going to go with I'm going to go with Illinois over Morehead State. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I got BYU over Duquesne. I got Drake over Washington State. I don't know much about the two teams, but I do know I have seen a little bit of Drake, and I like a lot of what I see out of Drake. So I'm going to go with Drake over Washington State. Lastly, out of the East region, I got Iowa State defeating San Diego State. I think Iowa State is a very good, talented team. I think they could easily be a 1 seed if it wasn't for the fact that they played so many quad 4 opponents. If it wasn't for that weak non-conference schedule of Iowa State, they would be a 1 seed, especially after the style and fashion that they upset Houston in the Big 12 championship. So we'll move down to the West. I got North Carolina beating Wagner. I'm not going to really go in depth into that too much, as we've only seen 2 16 seeds beat 1 seeds, and I don't think it's going to be Wagner over North Carolina if we see one this year. 8 versus 9, Michigan State, the 9 seed, playing 8 seed Mississippi State. I'm going to go with Mississippi State Bulldogs. I know it's a coin toss, but Mississippi State has played good down the stretch of the season, and they're coming off a really good win over Kentucky, and they played really hard and gave Auburn a lot of their toughest matchup that Auburn had in the SEC tournament over the past weekend on Saturday. So I think Mississippi State's playing their best basketball down the stretch. So Mississippi State could be a sneaky team to make it to the Sweet 16. And I'm sure Alabama would love to see that, but I got them beating Michigan State and advancing to play North Carolina in the round of 32. I got Grand Canyon beating St. Mary's. I know this is an upset. This is one of my 12 versus 5 upsets. St. Mary's is a team that plays really good defense. They'll really force you to play their game. At least that's how they try to do it in order to win. They like to slow it down offensively. Defensively, they prevent you from shooting a lot of threes, which is what Grand Canyon likes to do a lot of. And they force you to play their game and force you to shoot contested shots around the rim. However, the reason why I'm going to go with Grand Canyon is I recently saw St. Mary's runs a similar style as Tony Bennett in Virginia, and I just recently saw last night in the first 4 games. Granted, St. Mary's is not Virginia, and Grand Canyon is not Colorado State. But I just saw where Virginia struggled, and they struggled to put up any points. And I know a lot of that was just missing shots from point-blank range, but I'm going to go with Grand Canyon upsetting St. Mary's. I just think that slow style pace, while it works sometimes, I mean, we kind of saw it with San Diego State last year getting to the Final Four. I just think Grand Canyon is explosive enough and has enough offense and can get a stop or two where I think that they will be able to upset St. Mary's. And then I will have Alabama advancing over Charleston in the round of 64, and they will face Grand Canyon in the round of 32. Next, I got New Mexico, one of my potential, and then my number one potential Cinderella team. I got them upsetting Clemson. I just do not like Clemson, do not like what I've seen of Clemson. I know they upset Alabama at Coleman Coliseum in November, but that was November. They had a couple of good non-conference wins, including a win over UAB. But then again, they lost to Georgia Tech, and they've lost some other questionable games in conference play. That's why I do not trust the Tigers, and I really want to, but I just can't. So I'm going to go with the Lobos as the 11th seed beating the 6th seed. I got Baylor versus Colgate. Colgate's basically become one of those teams that you can just go ahead and mark in your bracket somewhere between 14 and 16. I believe this is the fourth consecutive NCAA tournament that Colgate is in. It seems like every year I make a bracket, they're featured in it, and congratulations to Colgate again on making the NCAA tournament. But I'm going to go with Baylor over Colgate. And then next I got Nevada, the 10 seed, beating Dayton. Anthony Grant and the Dayton Flyers out of the Atlantic 10 will have to play the 10 seed Nevada. Wolfpack, Nevada, coming out of the Mountain West Conference, a really competitive conference and so they had to do a lot to even get here in the first place. I just do not trust Dayton. I like Dayton. I like Anthony Grant, former Alabama head basketball coach. Someone that I thought could coach really well, just couldn't really recruit at Alabama. I wish him all the best, but I just can't go with Dayton. Don't trust them, and so I'm going to go with the Wolfpack out of the Mountain West. And then next, I got Arizona beating Long Beach State. If you've been an avid basketball fan, you've probably have heard the news of Long Beach State. Their head coach was fired and let go. Well, not really let go, but he was allowed to stay and coach the remainder of the season. He was fired before the beginning of the conference tournament. Well, Long Beach State went on the run and won their conference tournament, and it's already came out that their head coach and Long Beach State will part ways at the end of the season regardless of what happens in the NCAA tournament. So that's something to keep an eye out for if they were to upset Arizona. Here, last couple years, we have seen several 15s upset a 2. Will it happen this year? I don't think so, but it is an interesting storyline to follow. Very interesting to see how Long Beach State plays. But I'm going to have to go with Arizona. Got several veterans on that team, including the North Carolina transfer. So I'm going to go with Arizona over Long Beach State. So on the other side of the bracket, I got on the South region Houston beating Longwood. I'm not going to go into depth into that one. I got Texas A&M beating Nebraska. I went back and forth. Originally had Nebraska beating Texas A&M. But the closer I look at it, Nebraska's only won 3 road games all season. This is a neutral site game. A lot of interesting storylines going on with the Texas A&M. Newly hired Texas A&M athletic director was hired last week. He comes from Nebraska. He played at Nebraska. I believe he played football or basketball in Nebraska, but he left his alma mater for the big bucks at College Station at Texas A&M. Very dramatic situation going on there. A lot of fighting going on between the Texas A&M and Nebraska fan base online. Just something just an interesting storyline outside of basketball, really, but just an interesting storyline nonetheless. But I have Texas A&M beating Nebraska. Originally had Nebraska, as I mentioned, but with only 3 wins on the road all season, I don't trust them outside of Nebraska, so I'm going to go with the Aggies out of the SEC. Next, I got James Madison, Wisconsin. I originally had Wisconsin beating James Madison, but I changed my pick as I didn't feel comfortable with Duke, but I think Duke would have beaten Wisconsin. The more I read about James Madison, the more I liked. I think I have him as number 3 on my top 5 potential Cinderella teams. So I'm going to go with the Cinderella story here. I'm going to go with James Madison upsetting Wisconsin. So another 12 advances to the round of 32. I got Duke advancing and beating 13 seed Vermont. I got Texas Tech beating NC State. I know NC State is a lot of people's America's team. They won it on an incredible run, one of the best runs we've seen in a while. I think they won 5 games in 5 days to win the ACC championship, defeated North Carolina to get the automatic bid to make the NCAA tournament. Was probably the reason why St. John, or well, really teams like Seton Hall was left out of the NCAA tournament. So regardless, NC State playing Texas Tech. I got Texas Tech. That'll be the end of the NC State Cinderella. Good story, winning 5 games in 5 days, but I think their season is over. Kentucky playing Oakland. Yes, not Oakland, California, but this school is located in Michigan, I believe. I got the Kentucky Wildcats over 14 seed Oakland. Next, I got Florida playing Boise State. I think Boise State will beat Colorado. I like a lot of what the Mountain West has to offer. I think they're one of the more underrated conferences, maybe the 3rd best conference in the country, just above the Big Ten and underneath the Big 12 and SEC. So I'm gonna go with Boise State on the upset over Florida. Florida had their big man injured against Auburn in the SEC tournament championship. We wish the best of luck to him and a speedy recovery. But I think that's going to hurt Florida inside. So I'm going to go with Boise State over Florida, upsetting the Gators, the 7th seed. I got Marquette beating Western Kentucky. I'm not going to really go in depth into that one. I got Purdue beating Montana State. Final Fours playing as I'm speaking, but I think Montana State, at least they were earlier, was ahead of Grambling State. So they'll more likely play Montana State, and I got Purdue. I do not think they'll fall victim to a 16 seed for a second consecutive year. I think Matt Painter and Zach Edey and the guys will be ready, and they won't be taking Montana State for granted. So 8 and 9, I'm going to go with my gut here. Like I mentioned, I like the Mountain West a lot, so I'm going to go with Utah State beating TCU, and I'm not really a big fan of what TCU's looked like this year, especially coming off of what they did last year. I'm going to go with Gonzaga over McNeese State. I know McNeese State is probably the number 1 pick among the talking heads of a Cinderella, and I certainly like what they have done. 30-3 on the season. Very talented team. Will Wade's done a good job there. He's got the ball rolling. I don't know if you've seen, but I believe there was an article published by The Athletic, kind of documented what he's been doing there. Very encouraging to see. Encouraging a lot of players to get the bag next season. He got in a lot of transfers in the program, and his message has been, I'm going to coach you to success, but, after the offseason, if a program comes and offers you a scholarship and offers you the bag, go and take it. So interesting to see how Will Wade is handling the NIL situation, especially with the dramatic departure he had at LSU. Basically, everything he did is kind of legal now. But nonetheless, done a good job in his first season at McNeese State. But I think his season ends early in the tournament in March against Gonzaga. I think Gonzaga has the potential of being a 5 seed Cinderella, if you would even call it that. But I think they have a potential to make a run. Samford over Kansas, I mentioned it earlier. Kansas is battered right now with McCullough Jr. being out and Dickinson being hurt. He's not going to be 100%. They say he is. They say he won't have any limitations. Bill Self said that in the press conference today. But I doubt that. Recently, I believe it was a shoulder dislocation. And with Kansas's bench, I'm going to go with Samford. So I'm going to go Samford beats Kansas and advances to the round of 32. I got 6 seed South Carolina Gamecocks beating Oregon. I'm not going to go too much into that one. Just not a big believer in the Ducks, while they did make a run and I believe won the Pac-12 championship. I'm not a big believer in what the Ducks have to offer. nor am I a big believer in what the Pac-12 has to offer. So give me the Gamecocks beating the Ducks in the round of 64. I got Creighton beating Akron. Akron is a team that, if any of these 14 seeds were to be the 3 seed, that would probably be the one I would pick. But give me Creighton over Akron. I got Colorado State beating Texas. I kind of mentioned earlier. Not going to go too much into depth into that one. Don't really like Texas a whole lot. And I got Tennessee beating St. Peter's. As much as I like St. Peter's, as much as I think the entire country would love to see them go on another Cinderella run as they did 2 years ago. I just don't think they will. I think Tennessee will be more ready than Kentucky was, and I think Tennessee has a better defense than Kentucky did 2 seasons ago. So St. Peter's plays really good defensively, but man, is their offense hard to watch. It's similar to Virginia. So I don't know. St. Peter's going to be lucky to score 50 in this game. This may be a 50-point rout. Give me the Tennessee Volunteers over St. Peter's. So we'll go back to the top of the bracket, and back on the east side, I got UConn beating FAU. I got Auburn beating San Diego State. I don't think FAU is going to beat UConn. I think FAU benefited last season in large part to playing for Eli Dickinson in the round of 32 versus playing Purdue. So give me UConn, defending national champions. They're going to move on to the Sweet 16. I think Auburn will advance to the Sweet 16. I think Auburn has a lot of the pieces that Alabama didn't have last year to beat San Diego State. I think Auburn's got good depth. So give me the Tigers defeating the Aztecs. I got BYU upsetting Illinois, 6 seed over 3. We all know, us that are familiar with college basketball, is familiar with Illinois' woes in the NCAA Tournament of recent years and the Big Ten's woes. So give me BYU out of the Mountain West, advance to the Sweet 16, and give me Iowa State over Drake going to the Sweet 16. So out of the West side, in the round 32, give me North Carolina over Mississippi State, although interesting matchup. Mississippi State does beat North Carolina. Boy, does that shake things up, and I think Alabama gets over Grand Canyon. So if Mississippi State were to upset North Carolina, Alabama may be poised to make a deeper run where no one really expected it. Be one of the more flawed Nate Oates teams, and I've told a lot of people this year that I would not be surprised if it was the Crimson Tide this year that everyone kind of dismisses going into the tournament and they make a run. And I don't say that as an Alabama fan. I just say it would be this year of all years, one of the more flawed Nate Oates teams, and probably one of the least expected teams coming into the tournament to make a run. And typically that's kind of how it goes, after all, it was 2004. It was Mark Gottfried's led Alabama team. It wasn't a led team by Nate Oates. It wasn't a team led by Wimp Sanderson. It was a team led by Mark Gottfried, who took a team that was who got embarrassingly beat by Florida in the SEC tournament in their game before the NCAA tournament. And I believe it was a 9 seed or 8 seed Alabama team that made that run to the Elite Eight. So don't be shocked if it is this 4-seeded Alabama team that shocks everybody and of all teams breaks the Sweet 16 wall for the first time since 2004 and gets to the Elite Eight. But regardless, I have Alabama over Grand Canyon. Similar to Charleston, I think Alabama will be able to outscore Grand Canyon, and I think Alabama has a star led by Mark Sears that can step in and take over a game, whereas Charleston and Grand Canyon does not if it becomes a high-scoring affair. Next, I got New Mexico over Baylor. I do not like what Baylor has to offer, and I like that matchup for New Mexico. Give me the Lobos advancing over the Bears. And then I got Arizona beating Nevada. I think Nevada's season, while it was a good one out of the Mountain West, I think it ends versus a veteran-led Wildcat squad in round of 32. So give me the Wildcats going to the Sweet 16. So on the other side of the bracket, real quick, out of the south side, I got Houston beating Texas A&M. I got James Madison upsetting Duke. I do not like what Duke has to offer, especially what little I've seen out of out of ACC play. Losing to, I believe it was Wake Forest, and then losing to North Carolina. I believe it was 2 or 3 times. So give me James Madison over Duke in a upset. So the 12 seed will advance to the Sweet 16. Give me Kentucky over Texas Tech. I think Kentucky will be able to outscore Texas Tech and force Texas Tech to play their style of play. One thing to watch out for is Kentucky, while very much like Alabama, very good offensively, but their defense is, I believe, 102nd in defense efficiency. So Kentucky is one of those teams that is vulnerable. But I do have them going past around the 32 and even past the Sweet 16. I got Boise State upsetting Marquette. With Marquette being a little bit of injury plagued right now, going into the NCAA tournament, we'll see what they're like. I didn't really like how they ended the down the stretch of the in the Big East. So give me Boise State upsetting Marquette. I got Purdue beating Utah State and getting past the round of 32. I got Gonzaga beating Samford. Although I will not be surprised if the Bulldogs of Samford were to beat Gonzaga, just because, as I previously mentioned, Gonzaga, like Kansas, really goes 7 deep, and with Samford's style of play, their fast pace, really it will more than likely come down if Samford can stay out of foul trouble playing the bigs of Gonzaga. Samford could potentially upset Gonzaga. I got South Carolina upsetting Creighton. I do not like this matchup for Creighton, and I think South Carolina is a scrappy team out of the SEC. Like a lot of what Gamecocks have done this year. I know they've gotten blown out versus some good teams, but they also have played good against some teams like Tennessee. So I think this team could make a run, and I believe it's in Charlotte. So it would be pretty much a home game for Creighton. So give me South Carolina upsetting Creighton and getting to the Sweet 16. And I think Tennessee, while Colorado State does have Cinderella potential, I know we've all been aware of Rick Barnes' trouble in the NCAA tournament, but mostly his trouble has been in the Sweet 16. So give me Tennessee, not upsetting, but we're going chalk. Give me Tennessee beating Colorado State. Going on the other side of the bracket as we start in the Sweet 16, on the weekend of March 28th, 29th, give me Auburn beating UConn. I think there's only been one defending champion in this century, and that was the 07-08 Florida Gators. UConn arguably has a more talented roster than they had last season. However, UConn benefited from some favorable matchups last season, and I don't think they really faced a team to the caliber of Auburn last year. You can correct me if I am mistaken, but I think the Auburn Tigers, with their depth, with Janai Broome, Jalen Williams, if they can get Aiden Hardaway going, I think Auburn's a really dangerous team, and a team that could potentially make a Final Four. Give me the Auburn Tigers upsetting the Huskies. And give me Iowa State beating BYU. I think Iowa State is a really good 2 seed, potentially a 1 seed if it wasn't for their weak non-conference. As good as BYU is, give me Iowa State over BYU. So a Big 12 matchup there in the Sweet 16. I got North Carolina over Alabama. As much as I would like to pick Alabama, that would just be too much bias for me. And I really just don't see with how Alabama played down the stretch that they could get past the North Carolina team. Although I think that would be an interesting matchup to see if Alabama could test North Carolina, if Alabama can get their offense going at the right time. And you would assume they would if they get past Charleston and Grand Canyon or St. Mary's. So it would be interesting to see, and really interesting if Alabama faces Mississippi State if the Bulldogs were to upset the Tar Heels. But regardless, I got North Carolina over Alabama. I got New Mexico upsetting 2-seeded Arizona. Don't ask me why, but this is just one of those games where I think New Mexico inexplicably upsets 2-seeded Arizona. I think here recently we've seen some crazy things happen, some crazy teams make some crazy runs, and I think New Mexico is one of those unanticipated teams to make a run to the Final Four. Don't have them going to the Final Four, but at least they will make a run to the Elite Eight. On the other side, I got Houston beating James Madison. I think James Madison's season comes to an end versus the Cougars. I got Kentucky over Boise State. I think Kentucky will be able to outscore Boise State. I got Purdue over Gonzaga. I think Purdue finally gets past the Sweet 16, and I also have Rick Barnes, although would not be shocked if the Gamecocks were to upset Tennessee, as we have seen it already once this year. South Carolina seems to be a tricky matchup for the Volunteers for whatever reason, but I think Rick Barnes and Matt Painter get to the Elite Eight, and it becomes a matchup between them two to see who can get over their streak of bad luck as they get into the later rounds of the NCAA tournament. And so we'll go to the other side real quick for the Elite Eight. I got Auburn and Iowa State playing in the Elite Eight, and I got North Carolina and New Mexico. I have Iowa State beating 4-seeded Auburn to go to the Final Four. I think that's going to be a really good matchup, possibly a coin flip. But I think Iowa State playing in the more physical Big 12. Typically down this stretch, especially in the later rounds of the NCAA tournament, you see the referees letting them play. And I think this is where the physicality of the Big 12 will pay off down the stretch in the NCAA tournament. So give me the Iowa State Cyclones beating the Auburn Tigers out of the SEC to advance to the Final Four, where they will await North Carolina. I think this will be where the magic ends for the Lobos. So give me North Carolina beating New Mexico in the Elite Eight to advance to the Final Four. On the other side in the Elite Eight, give me Houston over Kentucky. Houston plays good defense. I think they're going to be one of those teams that can force Kentucky to play their style of play, and Kentucky will not be able to stop Houston inside, as Houston will like to go to the rim and draw fouls and get to the free throw line. And so that's where I think Houston will end Calipari's season. So I think Houston will advance to the Final Four. And then give me Tennessee over Purdue. This was one that I went back and forth on, but I think don't connect. That game will go off, and I think they will be able to get. I think Tennessee is really good at getting to the free throw line, so I think they'll finally be able to get Zach Edey into foul trouble, and I think Tennessee will be able to. And I think them and Rick Barnes will get past their Sweet 16 and Elite 8 curse, and I think they will get to the program's first ever Final Four here in 2024 just because of the matchups and different things like that. So as we get to the Final Four in Glendale, Arizona, I have on the other side of the bracket, on the left side of the bracket, I got Iowa State beating North Carolina. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I got Iowa State. Really, I would value them as a 1 seed. But they are a very good 2 seed, and North Carolina, I think, really gets here just because of the matchups favoring them down the stretch in the NCAA tournament. I'm not really a big believer in North Carolina either. For whatever reason, I'm just not. I have someone I believe that's picking them as their national champion, but I just don't trust North Carolina. I don't trust the ACC this season. And, they may shock me. I mean, they got 2 blue bloods in North Carolina and Duke, and both may shock me, and we may see them in the Final Four. But I'm going to go with Iowa State over North Carolina in the Final Four. I believe it would be Iowa State's first ever national championship appearance. And I think this, again, where I think the Big 12 physicality will pay off down the stretch in the NCAA tournament. It seems that it's done that in the last couple of years. You see Texas Tech make it to the NCAA tournament championship. You saw Baylor in 21. I can't necessarily remember who won it in 22. And then, of course, you had a weird fluky year where you saw UConn, San Diego State, FAU, all in the Final Four. But I think this is where the Big 12's physicality pays off, and I think they will advance to the championship. And I think you will have a Big 12 versus Big 12 matchup, as I think Houston, like they did against, like they will do against Kentucky, will do the same against Tennessee. They will force Tennessee to play their style of play. They will stop Dalton. I think they'll be really good in stopping Dalton Connect around the perimeter and giving him 3-point looks. And I believe Houston will match Tennessee inside with their physicality, and I think Houston will beat Tennessee in the Final Four. And I think it will be a Big 12 matchup between the Houston Cougars and Iowa State Cyclones, a rematch of the Big 12 championship. And I know what a lot of y'all will say. Y'all will say I'm crazy. We just saw this matchup play out in the Big 12 championship. We saw the Cougars lose by 20 plus, and we saw them have to go in the garbage time to get over 40. That was bad. That was pathetically bad, I will admit. And really, I don't know why I have Houston as my national champion. But there's a lot of things that you do in life that you just don't know why. But I'm going to go with the Cougars winning the national championship. I got them over the Iowa State Cyclones. They've played 3 times already this year. Iowa State winning 2. Iowa State winning at Iowa. Houston winning at Houston. And Iowa State winning in the Big 12 championship. Can you beat a team 3 times in a season? That's hard, and I don't really think they can. I think Kelvin Sampson finally gets Houston over that hump, and I think the Cougars will win the 2024 NCAA National Championship. I think 108 points is a good point prediction in terms of total points scored in the national championship game. May revise that number as 2 Big 12 teams, if that were to happen, both teams like to play defense, so it may be a low-scoring affair. So I may get within under 100, but for now I'm going to go 108. So that is the conclusion of the bracket show. I got Houston as my national champion. But before we close it off, I just want to thank each and every one of y'all for tuning in. I'm just really glad to, and hopefully we'll get back started on some more content being posted to YouTube and Facebook Live. Just been busy. Me and Austin Baldwin have been busy. Austin Baldwin calling Russell High School baseball games on WGOL. I've been busy producing and doing play-by-play for the Northwest Shoals Patriots in baseball. Really enjoy that, so be sure to tune in and stay updated for that. Keep up some Northwest Shoals Patriots baseball as they lead the Alabama Community College Conference right now, as they will begin a series versus Gadsden State tomorrow at, I believe, 2 o'clock. So tune in around 1:45 p.m. Central Standard Time if you're not watching the NCAA Tournament. And if you just want to take a break in between watching the NCAA Tournament, tune in to the Northwest Shoals Athletics Facebook page. We will be streaming that live, produced by the Tennessee Valley Sports Network. And your one and only Noah Brady will do the play-by-play. But before we close, I just want to encourage you to join the 2024 Tennessee Valley Sports Network Bracket Challenge on the ESPN Tournament Challenge app. With the arrival of March Madness, we are doing a bracket challenge. Test your college basketball knowledge, or just get in on the fun and submit your bracket to the ESPN Tournament Challenge group. As the tournament plays out, see how your bracket stacks up with the rest of the group. No gimmicks, no requirements, just bragging rights. Join our group by searching the Tennessee Valley Sports Network Bracket Challenge or by clicking the link in the description below. That is the Tennessee Valley Sports Network Bracket Challenge. Well, thank you, everyone, and hopefully we'll do this next year. It was a great pleasure of doing this and a lot of fun of doing the research for this show. For a lot of y'all basketball junkies, I hope it was good for y'all. And I admit, I'm not a know-it-all. I'm not someone that predicts or is trying to project like I'm someone that is an expert on this. I'm not. You can look at my past brackets to just see my track record. It's not that good. I overthink it. I always go back and go in way too much on a potential Cinderella team. And, of course, as y'all all know, a lot of times the Cinderella team, the surprise team, comes out of nowhere. It's the team that you least expect. What scares me is everyone's talking about Samford. A lot of people's talking about UAB, but no one's talking about Colgate. No one's talking about Akron, and those are very well could be the teams that wind up making the run and putting their names as by Cinderella and getting their dancing shoes on into the second weekend. But as we go on and into March and as we watch the NCAA tournament, we'll probably I'll try to keep y'all updated. I'll do a show, and we'll definitely go in some in-depth coverage if some of the scenarios play out, like if Samford was to make it to the second weekend, Alabama, Auburn, UAB, if any of those teams make it to the second weekend, we'll be sure to give an update. And we'll try to, if when that time comes, when inevitably our brackets are busted, be sure to stay tuned, as we'll probably have a group for a second chance tournament challenge. But I'm Noah Brady, so thank y'all for tuning in to the Tennessee Valley Sports Network in this edition of the 2024 Tennessee Valley Sports Network March Madness Preview Show. Thank you, everybody.